Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today we're in my sewing corner. We're of course doing a sewing project. This one in theory should be relatively easy, but we're gonna see how that actually works out in practice. I am doing a blanket jacket today. So this is a pattern that I saw probably on TikTok, honestly, and it's a McCalls Crafts Creative Clothing, and it's how to make a jacket out of a blanket. So that's what we're doing today. We'll see how this works. I'm gonna get my serger up and running for this project because I think this is gonna be really fray-y. So that is my thoughts off the bat. This is the very exciting blanket I will be using. It has like all these different kind of seed packet motifs. I thought this would be really cute, and honestly I thought a blanket jacket would be super nice for when I'm like at home around the house to wear around, but also something that is fun and gives me joy is always great. I really love it when cozy clothing gives you joy because oftentimes it kind of makes you feel schlumpy, and so having something that I think will be a lot of fun to wear and also cozy is going to be wonderful. And anybody who knows me in real life knows I always have a blanket on me, even like in the middle of summer. So this feels like a really creative way to have a blanket on me. And it felt like just like a great kind of fall winter project. Not too worried about fit. These aren't supposed to like fit particularly well. In fact, I think they're probably one size, which is a little bit questionable. I'm excited and hopefully I don't find out this is the wrong size. And my first step here is actually to cut out the pattern pieces themselves before I cut out the fabric. All right, the most important thing when cutting out this jacket, because of the fact that this was a grid in squares, was placement. I think placement is always really important when you're doing any sort of upcycling, but in general, if you're trying to get trim to go anywhere, you have to be so intentional about where you're putting this. And I was in for a pleasant surprise. I was worried about figuring out how to put this together, but ultimately I basically have two pieces, which is pretty cool. I have the body piece, which is just one piece. You don't have a side seam unless you have, it's either a bigger or smaller blanket, I can't remember which, and then you have the sleeves and you have the collar. So this is gonna be a really basic project and come together pretty fast. And we finally have the debut of my serger on this channel. So I am using this serger basically just to finish all the edges. I'm not sewing anything together with the serger. I am just trying to prevent fray. I was not yet confident enough with my serger, and honestly I wasn't trustful enough of this fabric to use the serger itself as the seam putter together. I thought it would still be better if we had a little bit more of a seam allowance than what my serger would allow us to keep. I am pleased. I find my serger really easy to use, so definitely regret taking so long to get it out, but now that it's out, I am cruising when I sew. Also, this here is your reminder that I do have a Patreon where you can go over and support me monthly. I also have a Ko-fi where you can either just buy me a coffee or you could subscribe monthly there as well. Last year, I made negative 82 cents for every hour I worked on this channel, which means I pay to be here, so I always really appreciate any financial support from subscribers. And then this is actually not my preferred method. I was just learning how to do it exactly how I wanted to do this when I did this project. I actually prefer to use a big darning needle, but here I am using a tiny little crochet hook to pull in all of my loose ends from the serging. And then here I am pinning the sleeves together. So just, you know, that underarm seam. That is so wild to me that it's this simple, but this is the first step. And then boldly, and before I tried this on, I decided after pressing the seams open, I was going to also press the hem. This definitely ended up a little long, which I'll talk about in the future. Hello, we've made it to Media on My Mind, where I talk about all the media I have been consuming. It is fall, we're starting to get cozy, which means I'm starting to watch a lot more TV. And while I do that, I am going to be slip stitching my sleeves here. Just the hems. I decided I wanted to hem this before I have the whole blanket coat to wield, because that's gonna just be a lot. Since this is kind of, for me, really a home coat, I don't think it matters too much what the sleeve length is. Although, because I do plan on washing this quite a bit, I am going to make my slip stitches really small compared to my normal slip stitches. As far as what I have been watching, I have been, like I said, in a TV kick. I've also been in a TV kick because work has been really exhausting. Reading just takes a little bit more energy. So yeah, I've been watching a lot more TV. And I have done 2 documentaries and a drama, scripted is I think the term I'm looking for, show. So the first documentary I watched is The Jinx, which has 2 seasons on HBO. Spoilers ahead, although it's been out for a long time. But it's about a rich guy who killed people and basically got away with it. So here's the thing. I think the guy was guilty. I think he 100% did it. I think he deserved to go to jail. All of those things are true. However, I just think it was like so purely circumstantial evidence-wise of a case. And like, I just have a lot of concern about that and like that precedence in our justice system, because there's a lot of innocent people in jail because of circumstantial evidence. So it's just really interesting, because definitely like a few years ago, I would have watched this and been not conflicted and just been, yeah, like, yay, go, whatever. Oh, thank you, Spooky. Spooky's in a bit of a mood today. Come here. Come on. Come in my lap. And now I have a lot more nuance because I understand a lot more of the justice system. And like, I think he only escaped prison for so long because of his privilege, but also I don't like the precedence of using like off-camera footage when he didn't know he was being recorded. I don't know. I have a lot of feelings, but it was a very good documentary. And honestly, documentaries that produce a lot of feelings like this, I think are often really good documentaries and well presented. Also, I felt like they definitely talked a ton to like the victims' families and stuff, and I really appreciate that. Would definitely recommend if you haven't watched it, and I'm sorry that I spoiled season 1 for you, and I guess season 2. And then after that, I watched I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which is another HBO documentary about a true crime writer who helped solve the Golden State Killer case. This is again another one that I feel a little bit conflicted on, the use of a DNA database, mainly from a privacy standpoint, and then also like, again, he did it. I'm glad he's in prison. All of that stuff is true. But like, right now, especially with everything going on in the country, I worry about certain legal precedents being set and what that means for people who are dissenting politically in this country right now. Like, I just worry about the precedent some of this stuff set. Because obviously these cases about murder have a critical eye towards also some of the tactics used. However, I will say I also really liked in I'll Be Gone in the Dark. I felt like they, again, really centered a lot of victims' voices, and I loved kind of the story they told with the victims telling their story and how they found community and hope despite what they'd been through. And I thought that was really beautiful, and I thought it was a really nicely done thing, because in general, I have very mixed feelings about true crime. I used to listen to a ton of true crime, but then one day, 10 years after it had happened, listened to a podcast covering a murder of someone from my childhood who I grew up with, who was later murdered in her teens. And I think the person who did the podcast was so respectful, and I think she did a wonderful job, but it was really hard to listen to as someone who like knew the victim, and I'm not gonna cry about it, but like, it was just really hard, and that really changed my perspective on true crime. It was weird to listen to something about my friend's death. Friend is kind of strong. Again, I grew up with her. We weren't friends when she was killed. It was really weird to listen to that and hear the ads and like I definitely like lean towards like My Favorite Murder and Morbid when I listen to a lot of true crime. And they kind of are sort of a comedic take on it too, and they make a ton of money off of it. And after listening to a podcast about my friend, her murderer, who I also knew, I couldn't listen to true crime in the same way ever again. And I do think it impacts families and communities a ton who have been through these experiences, and I think it does re-traumatize. And it's like, I'm not gonna be on a high horse and say I don't think people should listen or watch true crime at all. I do think we need to be really mindful about it. I felt really differently, and so I'm pretty now particular in what I'll consume true crime wise, and I do still consume a little bit, but usually it needs to be a documentary, and it needs to really include victims' voices. It needs to center that for me to be able to watch it, and I actually thought both of these documentaries accomplished that pretty well. I especially won't watch like a true crime documentary with all these like weird reenactments and like no voice from the victim and like focused on the killer. It's brutal for the communities who actually go through these. And of course, I don't speak for everybody. Of course, I'm sure there are people who have been through things similar to what I've been through and like are perfectly fine with true crime. But yeah, it definitely really changed my perspective, and like I was like not okay after listening to that podcast, which again, that podcaster did a really respectful and great job on covering it. And then the last thing, very much switching genres, I guess, is I watched a scripted show called Hunting Wives on Netflix. I actually ended up watching it because we did a routine to the theme song in my burlesque class, which was very fun, and so it made me more intrigued. about the show. So that's how I ended up watching it. Netflix kept trying to serve me it, and I was not in the mood for a scripted show, but I have to say, very, very good show, very well dramatized. Tons of trigger warnings, however. There is a lot of stuff in that show that's very violent, but I feel like the storyline's great, the twists are great, which is not super surprising because it's based on a book, and I in general think a lot of TV shows based on books are often better than TV shows that are just TV shows and are just scripted and whatever. And it was fun to see the clothes and the houses. In some ways, it also kind of, I think, reminded me of where I grew up, although also not in a lot of ways, but like some of the different like church dynamics, like I grew up in a mega church, so it kind of reminded me, some of the stuff in that reminded me of that. And yeah, it was just definitely an enjoyable 8-episode show. I saw they have renewed for a second season. That is it for media on my mind. I am pretty close on this sleeve. After that, I'm gonna make my lunch. I'm gonna do my meal prep for the week, and then we're gonna continue on. Honestly, this jacket project has been so easy. It's been so nice. I'm excited to wrap this up and have the coziest little blanket jacket for the cold months. So I'll catch you sewing a little bit later. And my next step is on the jacket pieces, sewing the shoulders together. I did watch really carefully to make sure I was sewing the correct shoulders together. This felt like one of those patterns that you could very easily get a little bit confused and turned around and pin some things together horribly wrong. And then I am sewing that, as you can see here. I believe this pattern calls for a 5/8 seam allowance, so that's what I'm using, which is kind of bulky with this much fabric, but again, I'm worried about fraying, which I feel like I've said a million times in the past few minutes. From there, I'm just easing in the arms to the armhole, and then I basically have everything but the collar done. And then here I am sewing the collar wrong side to wrong side because I actually want the seam allowance to stay on the outside of the coat, and it will actually be hidden by the way the collar like kind of flops over. This felt very counterintuitive, but I trusted the process. And then from there you can see the pattern itself actually asks me to understitch the seam edge down that's on the collar on the outside of the coat. This still felt very bizarre to me, but we're trusting the process. And then I'm trying to give this a really good press. This material did not really want to press. I was just trying to get the back collar to make sense and to work. I overall think the biggest flaw of this pattern is the fact that you have the seam for the collar outside. You rely on the collar to cover it. And this is like not a material that presses or holds a press particularly well, but that's okay. We persevere anyway. And after trying it on with it basically finished, I realized that I actually kind of wanted a button to keep the coat closed, especially if I'm wearing this like around the house or like when I'm sitting. I want to be able to have it stay closed. So here I'm making like a pretty big buttonhole, and then I'll have like a little green toggle that I found in my stash that I will sew onto the other side of the jacket. But with that, we are all ready for the reveal. Alrighty, you have seen the reveal on this one. I actually ran into an old friend from college while filming it. We're always filled with adventure over here on my channel. Seattle is the littlest large city ever, sometimes it feels like. As usual, we're gonna go through my cost breakdown, and then I'm gonna give you my final thoughts on this project. And last, we're gonna go with Hope Helps. That is the segments I have for you. For the cost breakdown, I did spend quite a bit on this blanket because I knew I wanted something like special that I'd want to wear a ton. If you find something at a thrift store, it would absolutely be cheaper. I've seen these blankets go for like $8 at the thrift store. I just had a very specific like look in mind. So I actually spent $54.35 on my fabric, aka the blanket. However, notions wise, this was so cheap because all I needed was thread and the button and my label. which cost me $3.32. So pretty good on the Notion side of things, which is why you could do this really cheaply. Pattern wise, I spent $16.55 on this pattern. This feels a little pricey for a modern pattern, but it was the only one out there that I saw when I was looking for this, and I wanted to use a pattern. I guess it's technically, I think, from the 90s, so not even that modern, but modern-ish, vaguely modern, modern adjacent. So yeah, that brings us to a supply total of $74.22, which is definitely cheaper than if I had someone custom make a blanket coat for me. So I'm happy with that price. As far as labor, because on this channel we talk about labor because labor is something that we're taught to not value, especially women's work. Sewing has always been considered, and we're constantly gaslighted and told that we're not worth anything, even though it is our labor that builds the wealth of others. And on top of that, of course, I always talk about there's garment workers in other countries that contribute to slave labor, child labor, just really terrible conditions. And those are the people who are often making those clothes that you can buy cheap here in the US. And we are building our own systems off of their oppression. And that's just always something that I want to call out. So there's all sorts of reasons I bring attention to labor. Since we talk about labor, we only talk about a living wage here on this channel. I do not accept anything under a living wage for talking about labor because everybody deserves to live. We are the richest or one of the richest countries in the world, yet our citizens are not having their basic needs met. So here in Seattle, we are expensive. So a living wage is $35.39. And this took me an hour and a half to cut. It would have been faster if I hadn't had to do some kind of rigged things. The sewing itself took 2 hours and 45 minutes. So pretty darn. This was a fast project. So that brings us to a total of time spent at 4 hours and 15 minutes. And we multiply that again by that living wage here in Seattle, which is $35.39, which brings us to the grand total of $150.41 on labor, which for me then to sell this coat and pay myself a living wage, I would have to sell it for $224.63. Honestly, I feel like I do see upcycled things go pretty expensively because there's just kind of no way to cheaply upcycle because upcycling is such a labor-intensive process compared to just using raw fabric. So in general, you're just not going to see upcycled pieces for very cheap unless, again, somebody is either not paying themselves a living wage or is exploiting others. But with that, that does wrap up my cost breakdown, and we're going to talk about the project itself. I have the jacket over here. I've made a few modifications since the reveal. I wore this for 2 days because I wasn't able to wear it for the full because it's actually really warm, which is exciting, but we're not in the season yet where I can wear something really warm all day long. So I first wore it on my couch, and I just noticed that the collar really kind of flipped around and I wasn't satisfied. And no matter how much I pressed it, I couldn't get it to lay the way I wanted. So I ended up just going in and doing 5 tacking stitches around the whole collar to keep all of the raw seams covered, because if you remember when I made this, the raw seams are actually on the outside because the idea is the collar covers it. That only has been working in theory, so yes, I ended up stitching that down. And then I actually wear this rolled twice on the cuffs. The sleeves are definitely way too long on me, and I could just hem them for me. I always think about the longevity of things outside of myself, and if I was to not want this coat, it will fit a lot more people if I don't hem it because it's pretty oversized, and I think the long arms makes it so more people can wear it, so I will not be hemming it. So I will cuff it. The cuffs stay really well, and if I ever decide that the cuffs don't stay well enough for me, I will actually just sew another just a stitch to basically pin it in place. Those are the 2 modifications I made after wearing it on the couch, and then I wore it to work the next day. I got loads of compliments on this. This is definitely one of my most complimented pieces to date, which is very fun. I wish I had taken a photo of how I styled it. I meant to, but then the day ended up being kind of chaotic and tiring, so by the time I got home, I just needed to change. But I styled this very differently. Obviously, I didn't wear it with a black slip at work. Instead, I wore it with a turtleneck and then a denim skirt, and then just wore it over those, and I have a little eggplant Avon, I believe 1970s necklace perfume bottle thing, and so I just felt very cute. It was very tied together, and I can see this being a really versatile piece for me. Biggest downsides of this piece, no pockets. The way to fix this, I could just put a patch pocket somewhere on it, but the problem with that is, which this is actually good on this pattern for being so efficient, This is all I have left of the blanket, so there is not enough for a patch pocket in sight. And the way this is constructed, you don't have a side seam to sew a pocket into. So I'd probably have to do like a full-on welt pockets situation, and right now I just don't feel like putting in that effort. Maybe it will deter me from wearing a jacket enough that I will decide to put a welt pocket in it eventually. And then as far as things I learned obviously placement. I don't know if I could see myself like really using this pattern again, because I can only really see myself needing one blanket coat, but I'll hold on to it for now because I do see these blankets at the thrift stores occasionally, and I do think this is really cute, and with the right blanket I would consider making one again. Like, this one's very earth tone, so maybe I would consider making a black one. And then as far as like new skills learned, this was my first time really using my serger. I've used other people's sergers previously. It was so easy because it was pre-threaded that we literally got it up and running in like 5 minutes. My friend Mayu came over. She has a YouTube channel too. She's right now just doing cross stitch, I believe, but she does sew and she does have videos teed up potentially. I really enjoyed this project actually overall, and I would make this again with plans for some sort of pocket, because yes, that is definitely the thing getting to me. I'm gonna keep my eye out also. I feel like I could see like a tea towel or something like that might match this enough to do a pocket with. Or I have some tapestry fabrics that I can also take a look at, or I could see if I could find like a patch of upholstery fabric online maybe that I feel like matches it so I can have a patch pocket. I just also don't want to like cover, I believe these are my potatoes. Yeah, I don't want to cover my potatoes. I don't really want to cover any of the images. So yes, I'm in a bit of a dilemma. A welded pocket would be the best way to not ruin anything, and I could strategically like place it. I guess I could also do like a full-on internal pocket, which now I think about it is maybe not the worst idea. So I'll sit on that a little bit, but yes, that is my biggest wish for this project. But yes, if you can get your hands on this pattern, I definitely recommend it. I will say it's one size fits all, which we all know is a bunch of bullshit. Gosh, I don't know if I would make this if you're any bigger than a large, US large. But with that, we are headed into Hope Help. Some of you guys said that you kind of prefer when I do a little bit more like what in my life is helping me cope. So I think what I have settled on, and this actually helps me out because it means I don't have to look at the news as much to find hopeful things. I feel better when I'm not reading mass amounts of news. What I'm gonna do is this one, we're just gonna, yeah, like I said, alternate whether it is something in my life that I'm finding really helpful versus things in the news that keep me hopeful, because I still want to say there is news that makes me hopeful regularly. But we're gonna talk today about things in my own life that are making me hopeful. It has been tough out here, you guys. I don't think I have to tell any of you that the government shutdown has been awful. When this goes out live, we'll know more about if so many Americans are getting their food benefits taken from them. It's bad out here. Everybody's feeling it for the most part. I don't honestly know how you could exist and not feel impacted by this. What's keeping me hopeful, I talk about this all the time, is staying really grounded in community and communal spaces. Some of these look like my deep and intimate community spaces, and some of these also look a little bit shallower. So let's talk kind of about what I mean by that. Not every human space you're gonna be in is going to be a deep interaction. You can only maintain so many deep friendships. I also actually consider a lot of community stuff like the people you interact with regularly. I am a very routine person, so I have often the same bus drivers, the same people on my buses, and I just always make sure that like I am kind of talking to people, which is very out of my comfort zone, but it makes me feel better. And talking about observing community, it is actually one of the biggest reasons I love the bus. I've had some pretty scary things happen to me on the bus, don't get me wrong, but my favorite thing about riding the bus is seeing kind of all these different micro communities. When you ride the bus, you see a lot of people helping each other, you see like groups of friends, and you see teenagers, and you see like, I just really enjoy watching community members interact with each other. It gives me hope because on the bus is when I see small kindnesses, like people helping people lift boxes or bags or hold doors or let the bus driver know that somebody's running. The bus just like makes me feel more hopeful, which is funny to say because again, I've had some pretty unfortunate things happen to me on the bus. Most of the time the bus makes me feel hopeful and happy, and I love getting to view my city through the lens of a bus. I think one of my favorite things about public transit is that it is more community oriented and it is more community based. Get to see the same people, and like I would not see most of the neighbors that I see on that bus regularly because they're not necessarily on my street, but we all convene being at the bus stop at the same times a few times a week. Especially like when you live in a city, like all these little interactions are actually kind of part of what makes up communities. And I think that's really neat. I have been really busy. I have been keeping myself very busy, not intentionally. It's just we had a weird summer in Seattle, so nobody really hosted much. But now everybody, like, it's like almost everybody's like last hurrah hosting. As a result, I am basically doing something almost every night for 3 weeks. So I wanted to talk about some of the different things I have been up to and kind of the reasons that these different community things give me hope. Another community that I've had for like the last 10 weeks is I've been taking a burlesque class. It's been on my list to get out of my comfort zone. It's really out of my comfort zone, honestly, but I think I finally get group exercise classes and why it's nice. There's something about moving your body with the rhythm of a ton of other people. And I don't just mean dancing. I mean, even when we're doing our warm up and we're all doing jumping jacks or running in place or planks or whatever it is, there's something that just like connects deep in my soul when I do that with people. So I am playing with the idea of how to maybe try some more things like that. But the other thing that I really appreciated is this week, the teacher just kind of was like, hey, things are really tough, things are really bad. I just want to like acknowledge that. And I also really want to acknowledge that that means looking at yourself in a mirror for an hour and a half might be really hard and your body and your mind might play mean tricks on you. I just want to acknowledge that, and like I want you to be as present in your body as you can be, but also I understand that your memory might not be great, or like there just might be a lot of things happening that make you not super plugged in. And I really appreciated that because there's just something about acknowledging that everyone's going through a hard time. I think like if I was to underline all of these things, it's that we're not alone. Like I think another great example of that is the No Kings protest, which I know I said I wasn't going to talk about news, but I do want to like briefly touch on it just because I think it's important to recognize. I see a lot of like people in like Seattle or spaces where there are more leftists like really crapping on it, and it really bothers me because I know people who went to protests where only like 110 people in their small town showed up, but it made them feel less alone. And I think anything that makes us feel like we're not alone right now in how hard and how much of a struggle everything is really important. I think that many people showing up is important, but most importantly, I think not feeling alone is important. And I think if there's one thing that No Kings demonstrated to me is that we're not alone. That gives me hope. Moving into my tighter and tighter communities, I also went on a sewing retreat this weekend. Oh, it was just so nice. We have kind of like a few more regular people in the sewing retreat, and these are all people who I feel like we have been retreating together for almost 4 years now. So like we just like get in really good, like I feel like rhythms of how things work, and just seeing the love and care that we all have for each other. And like, I don't know that I would identify us as super close. Some of these women I honestly really only see at retreats. So that's like a couple of times a year. But like, it's nice because it's several days. Again, I just felt less alone. And also I just love the way we rally and care for one another. There was very much concern in the room about the fact that I realized that I have not bought a new bra in 7 years. And everyone was very encouraging. And it sounds so silly and like such a basic thing, but that's just something that I like forget to do for myself sometimes, is to take care of like the needs in my wardrobe as opposed to the whimsical dreams. And like another person, we pay for her to come because she's a really talented cook and she cooks for us. So she gets to sew with us and we pay her room and board and she cooks for us, and she's so thankful. It's just so cool to see someone outpour so much talent to us and be so happy to do it because she's like, well, I don't get to cook for groups of people and like I feel really appreciated by you guys. I just appreciate people who appreciate each other and like love being open and serving, taking care of spaces, and it was really nice. I'm really rooting down through my community. And then I have a really small group of people who we meet up weekly and we create together and we talk about everything going on in our lives and we laugh a lot, and that really helps me. And then I'm just working on being honestly really active right now in communities. I think there's like a combo of reasons for that. One, I know it helps me feel better. I also think my antidepressants are really kicking this winter's butt. I have so much energy, which is weird. The last thing that I was going to talk about is I've been going to like community events that are within my interests. We have a pretty active and lively sewing scene in Seattle, so I go to several sewing events. And then I was also lucky. I have mentioned this podcast before. If you haven't listened to it, I really recommend it. It's a great way to learn about what is happening to garment workers, as well as other points of exploitation, warehouse workers, things like that within the fashion system, and kind of how that fits within the bigger picture of America, for I guess lack of a better term, or capitalism, I guess. And I really appreciate it, but it's called Clothes Horse. I really recommend you check it out. If you start from the beginning, I don't know what episode. I am on an episode at some point though. But I went to, she had a live show here in Seattle, which I was so excited to go to. It was so nice to be in a theater full of like-minded people and hear from people here in Seattle doing the work. So that was really exciting. If you see events that like just really hit your interests, go. I went alone. I walked in alone. I felt pretty awkward, but I left feeling really inspired by people who are doing things in my community. I feel like I found multiple places to potentially plug in as I kind of continue to try to move forward in spending more time in my real life doing things than online, because I think online is really important, but there's something about being in person that being online can't quite replace. And that's not to say if for whatever reason online is all you have, you can absolutely build a really real community there. I just like also really encourage you to build a support system that's like in your town or around you in physical, because there's just some things, and I say this as a long distance friends to many people, there's so many things that I can't do for my friends who live really far from me. Even though I love them, I can't bring them a coffee or do things for them the way I can my friends who are here. I would just really encourage you to find places to get plugged in your community, look for events. One of honestly the easiest ones to get plugged in is look at if you have any sort of craft store in your town or bookstore and see what's on their event calendars and go to those events. I know a craft store is a little niche. Not every town has it, and not even every town has a bookstore, but like look for those type of events, find places to volunteer, just find places to plug in with people. And like if you've been hermiting for the last 5 years, don't go in all at once. This like 3 weeks straight of being booked solid that I have, that's something that I've definitely had to like work my way up to stamina wise, and it's not something I could even sustain for a long period of time. Right now, actually it's funny because my like core group that we meet up once a week, I was talking about it and they're like, wow, Haylee, you're so busy. And they're like, depression can't hit a moving target. And it's just moments like that that make me laugh and give me joy and give me hope, because even though, you know, it's dark, it's at least funny. I believe so much in getting plugged into any community. We are definitely like herd animals. We are not solitary animals, and it's hard and it's vulnerable and you have to put yourself out of your comfort zone, and it's not convenient, quite frankly. My life was significantly more convenient when I didn't have friends, which sounds wild, but it was. It was also like a lot more expensive and isolating and bad for my mental health, but like arguably my time was all used more efficiently, because like even now I'm having a really hard time figuring out how to find time to edit and to even run this channel and do all the other things I want to do while also being this plugged in. And it's hard, and I want to acknowledge that it's hard, but I want to tell you it's worth it. And like we really need to hunker down and find places that give us joy. Just so much about growing and changing is not convenient. It's not necessarily fun, but it's worth it. We have, in theory, one life. Don't let fear win, and go and find your hope in those things that make you hopeful and the people in your community that make you believe again, because they're out there, and I truly believe that anywhere. And like also be realistic with your standards. People aren't perfect. People are incredibly imperfect, and we all have a lot going on. So give your communities grace during this time as well. But yeah, it's not all rosy, but it is worth it. But this was quite a little ramble. It's so funny. I'm feeling so worn down yet so inspired at the same time by the spaces I've been lucky enough to inhabit in the last few weeks. And I have about another 10 days of this, and then we wind down, hopefully. This is not my normal life at all, but I've been, I don't know, enjoying it, even though I feel like everything is always trying to steal that hope and that joy that I feel. I mean, you know the tenet of this channel, and I will again mention Clothes Horse. Something that I've really appreciated about her work has always been, we're not doomed, we're not cooked, and we don't use language like that, and I'm fully aligned with that. We're not doomed, we're not hopeless. Things have been worse before. things will be worse again. Life is like that. I always point to people who have lived through situations like this before, and people will again. We shouldn't feel alone here in this moment, but we also shouldn't feel alone when we look to the people who came before us. There's so much to learn from other countries that have been through this. I really believe that there is so much to look forward to. And I laughed because this quarter in my performance review, my manager said that she really appreciated my diplomacy and my optimism. And I'm like, those things? Who is she? But like, I really feel like in the last like 2 years, I've just really turned a corner because like, I will tell you, I'm not naturally an optimist, but like I've just turned a corner and I believe life is beautiful. I believe in us, and I also want to say I really appreciate everybody here. Also people who are especially still here. Thank you. I appreciate this community online. I'm going to talk about it more in upcoming videos, but the way I've changed my channel this year has just been so much more fulfilling, and I appreciate all of you who are still here despite the changes. So with that, I am going to go. This is actually my second to last full sewing process video of the year. We're going to go into a whole bunch of other good stuff though as the year winds to close. I have really great videos for you guys that I'm very excited about. I am in like my inspiration era. So we're diving in. Stay tuned. I will see you actually not next week, but the week after. I'm excited to show you everything I have up my sleeves for the next little bit. If you're still here, definitely subscribe and stick around. Like I said, I have lots of great stuff coming. And then as always, you can support me for free by liking or subscribing, or if you have money to spare, you can follow me over on my Patreon, sign up for a membership. And even if you don't, follow me on Patreon anyway, because sometimes that's the first place my video goes live because of all the different settings in all the different places. Be sure to find me over there as well as on Instagram. But with that, I will see you in a couple weeks. Bye!